I came across this post on Reddit, and I thought that it would be a great one for us to dissect and talk about. So this post basically was somebody asking a bunch of people who are against Bitcoin what would change their mind about Bitcoin. And one of the responses that I got was pretty interesting, and we talked about it before off cam. Um, we were talking about how the answer was about how we should restart Bitcoin. We should reset it, and we should redistribute all 21 million Bitcoin to everybody in the world. And I don't know, it's such a it's such a crazy idea to me. I don't think it would work, and I want you guys to give your input on this. So the reason why I personally don't think it would work is, of course, because number one, there has to be some kind of central authority. Number two, it'd be extremely difficult to distribute the Bitcoin. And I guess we can go into it. What are your
Yeah.
guys' thoughts on this?
My first thought to this is people would have no value of something like this. We can even see a historical example with Bitcoin, where in El Salvador, when Bitcoin adoption happened, everybody, all Salvadorians got access to the Chivo wallet with $30 worth of
Mm,
Bitcoin on there. And a ton of them just sold it right away because they had no understanding of Bitcoin. They had no prior knowledge of what this is. They just said, hey, this is 30 US dollars worth. I'm going to get $30 because I know what 30 US dollars is. So if Bitcoin was to reset and everybody gets all of that, there would just be a ton of people that would either not even care to sell it because they just see no value in it, or they would immediately sell it as they don't care about what this is. So immediately it would create, again, it would create some centralization of the distribution of it. It wouldn't be like everybody holds these coins and it's evenly distributed forever. It would again start to go towards, if people still believed in the future of this distributed Bitcoin, it would start to centralize right away anyway. So there's one thought there, but
yeah.
Right, because people wouldn't value it. So if you didn't
yeah.
value it, you're going to be spending it day one on probably something stupid, but you're also going to need to have somebody who's willing to accept it. And if nobody values it, nobody's going to accept it, right? So this is going to be an interesting one. I'm excited about this one. So I think that it's important just to kind of start out with like how Bitcoin initially was. If we can go back a little bit here, how Bitcoin initially was introduced to the world, and the beauty of it, and why we're all here with YouTube channels talking about Bitcoin, because it was the closest thing to perfect in my eyes. So essentially here, when you're looking at Bitcoin versus other cryptocurrencies, the one thing that Bitcoin has on everything else that they're all missing is the truly decentralized part of this. And how that worked is essentially everybody knows who Satoshi, or nobody knows who Satoshi is, but everybody knows that Satoshi created Bitcoin. And so the Genesis block back in 2009, block 0, Satoshi, when he started mining Bitcoin, he knew that he was going to get the first block reward because nobody else at that time was competing against him for it. And so what he did was he actually mined the first block, the first 50 coins, and then he made that wallet unspendable. So he knew, because he had no competition for the first one, that he had to make that unspendable to make this thing truly fair from day 0, essentially. And then he waited 6 more days before the next block was mined. And then pretty much anybody who was willing to listen to him, anybody who was part of the original emails with Satoshi, they were now able to start mining Bitcoin and competing for it. So it was a very fair distribution from day one. I mean, you could argue the fact that maybe the inside guys, they had an advantage here, and they probably did. But still, if you compare it to 10 people competing versus one person getting to decide who gets the coins, I think that Bitcoin is the perfect, the closest thing to perfect in terms of being fair, equally distributed. So you got something here, Jat?
Yeah. So this is the mempool. I like going to this website so much because it just shows you everything. So this is the first block that Jor was mentioning there. This is the very first block that was created. It was done 16 years ago, January 3rd, 2009 at 1:15 p.m. And we can see here that the Bitcoin that was sent to this wallet, this is the wallet that the Bitcoin was received in. There's a inscription here that says Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. It gives you a date. If we go to this address here, if we just click this, we can see that the Bitcoin is still there. Actually, people have been sending Bitcoin to it, 0.01 Bitcoin. But the way that I see it, I mean, the fact that nobody can move this Bitcoin just shows you that this is where the thing started, right? I mean, nobody can change this thing. Nobody can remove it. Even Satoshi, I don't think he can go back or he, she, they can go back and make this Bitcoin spendable. And look at the numbers there, $5.27 million. For us, for Canadians, this is like 100 million Canadian dollars, right? So why wouldn't we want to go back and change it? But I think that's the point here. You can't change it. You can't go back and rewrite history. Even the very next wallets we can see here. I think I'm assuming that Satoshi was the one who mined block number 1. So the Genesis block was block 0. We can see the number here. Block number 1 is the I guess the second block. We can see if we go to this address here, we can see that the Bitcoin is also still there. Again, another 100 million Canadian dollars that's just sitting there, right? And there's nothing we can do about it. Nobody can go in and say, hey, this was done unfairly. If you try to go back in time and reset everything, I think what you're doing is you're taking away from the fact that people were early. They took the risk, right? I mean, Satoshi, whoever followed his path, they didn't have to contribute their time, resources, and energy to this network. They took the risk. They put in that time when they could have spent it on something else. So what's your input on that, Forrest?
Yeah, my input is that you're right. It's the early adopters take on the risk, and the early adopters get rewarded for that. If you're buying Apple at their IPO, you're an early adopter of thinking that the public shares of Apple are worth something, and you are rewarded for that if you've held it until now because of the price appreciation of those shares. It's the same thing. And what this question of that you raised with the Reddit post, it's a question of fair launch, which is like the question that all altcoins have as well. They all think, how do we do this in what we deem as a fair launch? Like it really comes down to like, what is a fair launch? Is it fair for people to take outsized risk at the early stages of these projects, like a project like Bitcoin, and get these outsized returns? I think it's entirely fair. And it is fair because Bitcoin was public right off the bat. Like he issued it, he posted it online. Yeah, we didn't see that because we weren't in those circles, but it was there. It was still there, and it's impossible to replicate the fair launch of Bitcoin, and that's why Bitcoin is number 1, in my opinion.
And if you look at the distribution itself, it seemed like Satoshi was very strategic in how he actually released the coins. So if you're familiar with the Bitcoin halving schedule, most people might not even know this, but for the first 4 years, half of the Bitcoin were actually mined in the first halving cycle. So every 10 minutes at the early days, you could get 50 Bitcoin for mining basically on a computer, because the network was so small there, you could actually mine Bitcoin on just a normal laptop. And so if you hit the block, you got 50 Bitcoin there. And the cool thing about that is that it got the coins into circulation. It got people paying attention to it. It got people, excited about it. And that's what Bitcoin is. It's exciting. It's interesting. I mean, again, the 3 of us spend a lot of time talking about Bitcoin because of this incentive structure that Satoshi created here. So Rajat has a nice spreadsheet here showing the first 4 years. You can see that 10.5 million Bitcoin were mined before 2012, before the first halving epoch, essentially. So the half of Bitcoin, 10.5 million coins, were introduced in the first 3 years or 4 years. And for the next 140 years, the next half of Bitcoin, the next 10.5 million Bitcoin will be mined. So it's the incentive structure for me. It's the supply schedule. Everything was so well thought out in terms of like how to get people interested, how do people get value from this. And I think a lot of value that is actually in Bitcoin is because the fact that Rajat just showed block 0, we're now on block 880,000. All of those 880,000 blocks are there forever. Nobody can go back and change any of those blocks. And that's kind of what gives Bitcoin the value that it's got to today. Because at this time, you could buy a Bitcoin for like $1. So there was no history there. There was no time chain. There was no network. There was no people contributing to this thing. So that's what it was worth. And the only reason why it's $100,000 today is because there's been so much, there's so much time into that chain. There's so much energy in the network. And that's really what's securing this thing and making Bitcoin what it is.
And
Yeah.
I think there's something else to consider is the fact that, for example, I was pretty early to Bitcoin, as in I found out about it early. I found out about it maybe 2010, 2011, some point there, but I ignored it because I thought it was useless. I thought, what's the point of this thing? So if I'm willing to admit that I was wrong, I don't know why other people aren't. Like the comment that was posted was, so the comment said, if everyone that has Bitcoin agrees to distribute it uniformly to everyone so we can all have a fresh start, even then, I mean, if there is a fresh start, the people who get Bitcoin are probably going to lose it. They're going to ignore it. I mean, like, let's say, for example, if I were to send somebody $1,000 worth of Bitcoin today and they have no interest in it, if I were to send it to them in the wallet and they have a lot of money and they don't need that Bitcoin, they're going to forget about it. They're going to lose it. So what's the point of restarting it and starting fresh when the person who's getting it probably won't even care? Like if I had gotten Bitcoin in January of 2009, I would have probably left it and I would have lost it. I wouldn't have had the private keys. I would have probably, number one, sold it early if I knew about it, if I understood it. I would have sold it early because I wouldn't have had the patience to hold on to it. Number two, I wouldn't have cared.
Yeah. If it was all distributed evenly, it would fundamentally break so many things about what makes Bitcoin valuable, that I would probably sell it as well, because it would no longer be what I value. Because it, like the other thing there that we saw is the hash rate growing, the miners growing over time, and there's an eventuality where there's no more block reward, there's only fees. So if we went where all Bitcoin was evenly distributed, what would be the incentive for miners? It would only be fees. And how much fees are there in that situation? Probably not much, because we're still on that phase of still trying to figure out the fee situation and still growing the amount of fees and transactions on Bitcoin. So it just fundamentally breaks that incredibly important side of Bitcoin, which is the hash rate, the miners, and the fees.
The proof of work, essentially, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what makes Bitcoin different than any other monetary system in history, is the proof of work aspect, where it's the only currency, altcoins, dollars, whatever you want to look at it as, but it's the only thing that happens on the internet, which is where quite a few people spend quite a bit of time nowadays. But it's the only thing that actually takes real life energy and puts it into the digital sense. That's what proof of work is, essentially. You need real life electricity. There's two ways to get Bitcoin. You either plug in a miner, which uses your electricity, which is from the physical world, or you add value to somebody else's life and they pay you in a currency which you can convert for Bitcoin. That's the only way that any Bitcoin has ever been distributed before. So that's a big deal. That's a proof of work aspect of this. And I think that as you spend more and more time in Bitcoin, talking to Bitcoiners, that's kind of like the theme around everything, not just the supply, not just the currency, not just the network, but like everything that's worthwhile requires proof of work. And kind of going back to what both you guys were mentioning, if this thing was just sent out to everybody, nobody would value it. So it would be completely ineffective. So that it all ties full circle in terms of how this thing was designed, how it was released and distributed. And to get 880,000 blocks later, that just adds even more value to it, because it shows that you cannot break this thing. And the information within that time chain, or the Bitcoin network, is going to be there for longer than we are.
Yeah, I have another angle of looking at this as well. So if we take a look at the total amount of Bitcoin that's ever going to be available, there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. So we can see that number here, 21 million Bitcoin. One Bitcoin is worth 100 million Satoshis. The estimate for lost Bitcoin from River was 1.57 million Bitcoin. There are some numbers that are floating around, 3 million, 5 million, whatever the numbers are. The total estimated circulating supply, or total exact circulating supply right now, is about 19.8 million. In 2035, it'll be 20.75 million. So by 2035, you're going to have 99% of the supply mined. If we look at this from a different angle, where let's say we do want to reset Bitcoin, how much Bitcoin would each person get? So I did the calculations on this. We can see here, if we have 25% adoption of Bitcoin, so let's say 25% of the world adopts Bitcoin, and there's 19.8 million Bitcoin, in total, you'd get about 1 million Satoshis. If you have 50% adoption, you'd get about 500,000 Satoshis. If you have 75% adoption, you get about 330,000 Satoshis. If you have 100% adoption, so if every single person on Earth, exactly what the person was saying there, if every single person on Earth had the opportunity to buy Bitcoin and they got the same amount, each person would receive 247,500 Satoshis. So I think people are going the wrong way about they're going about this the wrong way. They're thinking that they're going to reset the network. They're going to get everybody to give up their Bitcoin, when in reality, what they could do is, instead of trying to change something that they can't change, they can go ahead and buy some Bitcoin, right? So for example, so in this case, 247,000 Bitcoin, or 247,500 Satoshis. How much would that cost? Maybe $250 US, like 350 Canadian. I don't see that as something that most people can't reach. Instead of trying to change the network, try to change yourself, try to change your mindset, and think about this as an investment in your future.
Yeah.
100%.
And yeah, it's 0.0025 Bitcoin basically.
Yeah.
Like it's not that significant. There's lots of people that can't reach that, but there's plenty of people in the world that totally 100% can. And once they realize what Bitcoin is, and once they hold it, they'll care more about what it is. They'll want to get more than that. You'll want more than 0.002475.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that you kind of touched on there is, like, the problem with this whole idea is that if it was that easy to change Bitcoin, then there would be some very centralized organization being able to control it. And Bitcoin is incredibly difficult to change. And again, that would just be another negative of this new Bitcoin, is if it can be changed that easy, then what's stopping it from changing the supply cap? What's stopping it from changing everything about it? And right now, that's the huge benefit. That's the biggest benefit of Bitcoin, is the decentralized nature of all the different aspects of it.
100%.
Yeah.
And just to go a little bit further on the $200 worth of Bitcoin or $250 worth of Bitcoin, look, you don't need to go into your checkings account. And if you're buying Bitcoin instead of food this month, that's not what we're advocating here. You probably have something kicking around your house. Maybe it's an old jacket. Maybe it's an old gold watch. Go swap that. And then at least you're part of this. And then you have some skin in the game. And then you become part of this network that as it grows, that's going to increase in value inherently. So that's the first thing, is that it's very easy. You don't have to go into debt, or you don't have to do anything stupid. Just like look around your house, start there. And the other part of that too is, like, that's in a perfect world where it's evenly distributed. But you have to understand that I think that the lost coins are far higher than that, for one. You also have to look at BlackRock, who now holds 1 million coins. So those aren't moving. Michael Saylor owns 500,000 of these things. Those aren't moving. So if you want to just kind of keep pace, you're going to require a lot less than that, honestly, because those ones aren't moving. So you can get ahead if you're trying to be like keeping up with the averages, keeping up with the Jones. Just get like 100,000, 200,000. Start there. You're probably going to be an equal distribution part of this network, and you're going to want to get more for sure. So yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, just setting yourself up, setting your kids up. I mean, I think if you can buy your kids 1 million Satoshis, I know that's not affordable for everybody. I know that's not even going to be possible for 99% of the population. But if you can get 1 million Satoshis, you could put them away for your kids. Let's say, for example, you don't have kids yet, they're not born yet. You want to just save for their future. 1 million Satoshis is going to get them pretty far, I think. I think back to your example there, Jor, where you could sell your watch to buy Bitcoin. More watches can be created, but more Bitcoin can't.
Yes.
So at some point, let's say, for example, today you can sell your watch for 250,000 Satoshis. At some point, your 250,000 Satoshis are going to buy 10 watches, 100 watches, 1,000 watches.
Yeah.
Or your kids' college fund.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
It's the only thing we've ever seen with a true supply cap. We've never seen anything else with an actual max supply. And dollar sat parity will happen. I see that happening.
Especially for Canadian dollars.
Especially Canadian dollars. It won't take very long, I don't think.
No.
But I mean, just that's a great idea, just with 1 million sats. I think that's kind of what the average person should be striving towards getting. It is going to be difficult for some people, but I think it is worth the time, the energy, and the proof of work to get that. And I think if you put that into a fund for 20 years, and even going back to what Rajat was talking about there in terms of $250 to get an equal distribution, 4 years ago, when I first started making videos, I guess on my channel, I think it was about $60. And the reason
Wow.
why it's gone from $60 evenly distributed to $250 is because of the scarcity aspect of it. And it's just going to, in 4 years from now, it's probably going to cost you $1,000 to get equally distributed, because the people who know, the people who have conviction over this thing, we're getting as many as we possibly can right now because we put in the work to understand it, and we understand scarcity and real assets and how valuable this thing is going to be in the future. So that's kind of my, I don't know. We should probably start closing this up here soon, eh?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
do you guys have
I
any
think that
more
was
points?
perfect.
One quick little thing here.
Of course.
It's the whole idea of just distributing it equally is money for nothing. It's just the idea of, you know, just everyone being equal, and that's just not reality. We live in a world where the more you provide value, the more you receive back. It just doesn't make sense that everything should be equal. That's just not reality. So it doesn't make sense to create money that doesn't interact or isn't in line with the reality of nature.
Yes.
So in conclusion, we should not reset Bitcoin.
No,
Definitely not.
definitely not.
Awesome.
Okay,
Wait.
thanks, guys. Well, this has been another episode of an unnamed three guys from Canada talking about Bitcoin. So if you're enjoying these, you probably know all of our channels. We'll have some links below. But thanks for coming by. We're going to try to make more of these and keep everybody informed and educated on it. So thanks, fellas.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.